Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. Right now I'm at Fort Whipple in Prescott, Arizona, and today we're going to be traveling what's said to be one of the most scenic roads in Arizona, and also one of the most historic, dating back hundreds of years. But I've never traveled this road before, and I'll be honest, taking a look at Google Maps, I kind of have my doubts about it, but there's only one way to really find out, and that's to travel through the interior of Arizona between Prescott and Seligman on Williamson Valley Road. We are starting our journey in the former capital of Arizona at Prescott, and we will be heading northwest to the Route 66 town of Seligman. Fort Whipple was established here in 1864 and was an army fort on and off until 1913. It became a veterans hospital during World War I and is still one to this day, so I'm not going to film too much here. There is a museum here, but it's not open right now. As you can see by the view from up here, this was a good place for a fort. The road we're taking today would be the same path often used by soldiers at Fort Whipple during the American Indian Wars, so I figured this would be a good place to start. But anyway, let's head on the road. We are now on Williamson Valley Road, which is said to be like traveling back in time to Arizona's territorial days. Prescott was founded in 1864 to be the capital of the Arizona Territory, replacing the temporary capital at Fort Whipple. It was the capital until 1867, then it was moved to Tucson for a decade, before moving back here. In 1889, the capital was moved to Phoenix, where it remains today. There are differing stories on why Prescott is pronounced the way it is instead of Prescott. My favorite story of why it's pronounced that way is that it was a compromise when the town was founded. People only agreed to the name Prescott if they could pronounce it Prescott. Whatever the truth is, it seems to be lost to history though. When taking a look at the road before coming out here, I noticed on the southern end how built up it is. It's basically the suburbs of Prescott. Because of that, some of the historic sites have been built over, or we just won't have access to them. This was once known as Simmons Highway, but it's really made up of several historic roads. This southern part of the road is pretty much the route of the historic Hardeeville Toll Road. Between 1864 and 1871, William Harrison Hardy had a contract with the United States Army at Prescott for the wagon transportation of supplies to be delivered from Hardeeville on the Colorado River to Fort Whipple. Hardeeville no longer exists today. It was located within the city limits of where Bullhead City is now. For the early part of the drive, we've had great views of Granite Mountain. A long time ago, this was called Mount Gurley for the first governor of the Arizona Territory, John Gurley. The name was short-lived though. Within a few years, it was being called Granite Mountain. Granite Mountain is pretty prominent here, but it's only the 56th tallest mountain in Arizona at 7,626 feet. This road is about 70 miles in length, but only the first 22 miles of it are paved. The road links Prescott and Seligman, but on old maps you'll see Seligman called Prescott Junction. That was its name until 1886, because it was the railroad stop on the Santa Fe Railroad, where you'd switch trains to catch a Prescott and Arizona Central Railway Company train to Prescott. We are now at American Ranch, or at least a gated housing community called American Ranch. The actual ranch the housing community is named for was an important stop for travelers on the stagecoach road in the 1800s. An early pioneer named Dan Connor staked this area as a homestead in 1863, calling it the American Ranch. He eventually left for California and traded his claim to Jefferson Harrison Lee for a gun. Lee built a ranch house complete with an escape tunnel in the likely event of an Indian raid, and that ended up being smart planning, as he used the tunnel when his house was burned down in one such raid. Most old stagecoach roads followed the same paths that Native Americans had used for centuries, and this road is no exception. When the Spanish first arrived in the area in the 1500s and 1600s, the Yavapai inhabited the area near Prescott, while the Wallapai were further north. Evidence of the Prescott culture, which dates from about 200 to 1300 AD, is also found in the area. We are passing by Inscription Canyon, which is now a private development, but the area contains over 1,300 examples of Native American petroglyphs. While this area had been home to the Yavapai for hundreds of years, they were not given a reservation until 1935, and then it was only 75 acres. In 1956, it was expanded with an additional 1,300 acres. Now that we're getting further from the town and there's less traffic on the road and less housing developments, the drive is definitely getting a lot more scenic. It looks like we've made it to the end of the paved road. This area was originally known as the Crossing, where stage, wagon trains, and freight wagons crossed the wash on the route between Prescott and Hardeeville. Earlier I had mentioned that this road was once known as the Simmons Highway. The stage stop and small town of Simmons that the road got its name from was located around here. The post office was established there in 1873, and it lasted until 1931, but the town is long gone. The town site is on private property now, so unfortunately we can't even look around. This cow is very curious to why we've stopped. The views are fantastic now, but interestingly enough, this part of the road is not officially designated a scenic road. Only the first 22 miles that are paved are officially a scenic road. There's some sort of red tape with who controls the road, and that's the reason that the unpaved portion isn't officially designated a scenic road, which is funny because to me this is by far the more scenic part of the road. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but a railroad used to run between Seligman and Prescott so that Prescott would be linked with the main Santa Fe line. That line opened in 1886, but had a number of problems early on. One being there was no turntable for the trains in Prescott, so the trains had to return to Seligman going backwards the entire way. By 1893 though, they did get the kinks worked out. I haven't seen a sign for it, but we're now entering the Prescott National Forest. Arizona Highways magazine recommends a four-wheel drive vehicle for this road, but so far that has not been needed at all. This road is actually very well graded, very smooth, and I'd say it's actually smoother than some of the city roads near where I live. Of course, I'm driving on a nice sunny day. I imagine during bad weather, four-wheel drive could be necessary then. We're now at mile 35.8 and we've come to this steel bridge. And it may look out of place here, and that's because it is. This bridge was built in 1912 on the San Carlos Indian Reservation, which is located east of Phoenix. It was part of a 7-span bridge on the Gila River. By 1916, a series of floods washed out the bridge, making it unusable. So the Arizona State Highway Department, not wanting to waste a good bridge, took over the still usable spans and sent them to various places for reuse. So in 1936, this span of the old bridge was installed here over Walnut Creek. I have to say, it's looking pretty good for being well over 100 years old. Well, being over 100 years old and having been moved halfway across the state. There's an old dam to our left, and there used to be a concrete bridge there before this bridge was put in. This bridge also marks the halfway point between Prescott and Seligman. We're taking a slight detour on foot. Near here was the town of Walnut Creek in the 1800s, and hidden out here somewhere is the Walnut Creek Cemetery, and we're going to see if we could find it. Hopefully we'll be able to find this cemetery. I don't think there's a path that actually goes out to it, and we asked someone at the ranger station for directions, and they gave directions like, oh, walk down the dirt road and keep going once you get past the dead cow, so I guess we'll see. They weren't kidding about the dead cow, so I guess we're on the right track. I totally thought they were joking. Where the town was, there is a ranger station and an education center there now, in buildings that were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s. This is also where the Hardyville Toll Road would turn west towards the Colorado River. And luckily there's a sign up here, maybe it'll give us some direction on where to go. I don't really remember a lot of the directions go past the dead cow. So hopefully this will lead us the way. And no, this is not going to lead us anywhere. Camp Wallapai, which was an army camp between 1869 and 1873, was right around here too. It was placed here to keep the road open and free from Indian attacks. We are coming to a fence, and I kind of remember in the instructions to go through a fence, then look down. So hopefully this is the fence, because I haven't seen any others. Okay, so I see another fence in the trees down below us, and that should be the cemetery. So yeah, there's no path that actually goes out to the cemetery, and it's not listed on Google Maps. So if anyone watching decides to try and go out there, just remember to look for the dead cow, and that's how you find the cemetery. At least, hopefully, that's how you find the cemetery. We haven't gotten there yet to confirm that this is actually it. I don't know what other reason there would be for a small fenced off area to be in the middle of these trees, but I guess until we get there we don't know for sure. I don't see any graves yet, but it is pretty overgrown in there. Oh yeah, this is definitely the cemetery. You can see some old graves back in there now. It looks like most of the graves are in pretty bad shape. Though this one still seems to be decent. Though I can't quite make out what it says from here. We'll take a look from the other side. And the fence on this one is just completely fallen down. And I can't see that one from here. This one's actually readable. Mariella Jane Rogers died March 6th, 1897. There used to be something written in the wood here, but I can't make it out at all now. And taking a look at this one from the other side, this one's also too worn to be read. It looks like there's also a grave right over here, but the headstone has been completely destroyed. Only the frame of it is left. Here's another spot where a grave is. There's no headstone, but there was a fence around the grave at one point. Walking around, you can see where there's some other graves, but there are no other headstones, at least none that I've seen so far. There was a fence here at one point, so there's obviously a grave there. And then right over here, here's another fence. But I don't see any headstones. This is a pretty small one around this tree. And I imagine there are other graves throughout here since this whole area is fenced off, but yeah, there's absolutely nothing left. It really kind of puts things in perspective because the people buried here died pretty close to modern times. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but now they're all pretty much forgotten. We're back on the road, and up to this point we've been roughly traveling along the path of the Hardyville Toll Road. Well, now we're on the path of the historic Old Military Trail, which the Army used to travel from Camp Wallapai to the north during the Wallapai War. The Wallapai War was pretty short-lived. It only lasted to about 1870, so 1865 to around 1870. The war started when drunken settlers killed a Wallapai leader named Onasaw during a meeting, and then the Wallapai retaliated by killing a settler and closing off the road to the Colorado River. There were a few battles, but what really did the Wallapai in was disease. There was a major whooping cough outbreak, and most ended up surrendering. The whole thing was disastrous for the Wallapai people, as they lost about a third of their population in a 5-year span. That is Picacho Butte in the distance. That's located about 9 miles east of Seligman. They weren't very good at coming up with original names in the 1800s, as there are a number of mountains in the area named Picacho, which just means peak in Spanish. We could also see Bill Williams Mountain here, which is about 35 miles away, near the town of Williams, Arizona. Harold Bell Wright opened his 1916 novel, When a Man's a Man, with the line, "There is a land where a man to live must be a man." That novel was inspired by his time living and traveling through Williamson Valley. Several movie adaptations were made of the book, including one that was filmed in Williamson Valley. Check out the view from here. You could see for miles in all directions. I was just commenting on how smooth the road was earlier. And now we have a flat and we have to change the tire. I'm not sure what did this, but it got me good. Alright, we got the spare on and we're back on the road. I have no idea what we ran over to do that to the tire. The road has been very smooth, very well graded, but I should probably stop talking about it before I jinx us again because we do not have another spare. We have less than 20 miles till we get to Seligman. This wide open range with the mountains in the background just looks like something straight out of a western. We're now at where the road is paved again, and that's Interstate 40 in front of us, so we're about at the end of the road as well. This road does link up with Route 66, so we'll take Route 66 right into Seligman. Seligman is a great Route 66 town, and it's actually the birthplace of historic Route 66, and definitely worth spending some time walking around and just kind of exploring the sights. But we're going to end our trip at the world-famous Snowcap and grab a bite to eat. We've made it to Seligman and Route 66, albeit with one less tire. So, what's the verdict on Williamson Valley Road? It was definitely scenic, especially once we got to the unpaved portion of it. But as far as it being one of the most scenic drives in Arizona, there are a lot of great scenic drives in Arizona, so that's a pretty hard list to get on. And I'm not quite sure Williamson Valley Road makes it on the list. It was definitely scenic and a lot of fun and worth doing, especially if you need to get between Prescott and Seligman, because the back roads are always the more fun way to go. Just make sure you bring a spare tire. But anyway, that's our look at Williamson Valley Road. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.